what we're going to be doing next, Evan has us doing our multi-step income statement next. Usually I close the accounts first, but he does it the other way, so we're going to do it the way that matches your midterm. And we're going to make a statement that looks like this. This is a multi-step income statement. Multi-step, all that means is that in the expenses section, you separate out the operating expenses from the administrative expenses. So you can see here, selling expenses and administrative expenses. And the rationale behind that being that you can see what's related to actually carrying, to actually making sales and making revenue. And you can see what's just administrative. So you know what you can expect if the operations scale up. So that's the theory. And so what we're going to do. When it comes to doing these, I don't know how Evan had you do it before, but I'm usually pretty aggressive when I do these things about looking at my trial balance sheet and starting to tick off the accounts as I use them. I think when it comes to this, because we're going to be doing a few different things here, you do have to be pretty aggressive about doing that and keeping well organized, because as soon as you get poorly organized on this question, that's when you get things that don't balance. I don't have an answer key to any of this. I'm kind of doing it with you guys as we go, so please correct me as we go, because I don't want us to be in a spot where we end up out of balance. So with our income statement, I guess the first thing that we can do is just make the easy part, get the easy marks first. So what's the AstroTerrain computers? I don't know what kind of resources all of you will have at your disposal here, but I am personally not able to do these things from memory. And let's just say 2021. I don't know what years in this example. So we have our title, and we're going to start off with sales.
Not sure if it's December 31st, but because on his instructions it says that it's April 2019.
April 30th. Thank you very much. I didn't actually see that. So April 30th, 2019. Yeah. So normally would actually, like that multi-step and that single-step statement is something that's used in textbooks. In reality, when you would look at, like, let's say you go to any publicly traded company and look at their income statement, it'll just say income statement and it won't tell you. We're going to write it down to make it clear, but that's just a helpful textbook convention to help students out rather than a necessary thing. By the way, with these year ends, there's a lot of reasons to not have a December 31st year end. Usually it's cheaper to get accountants to work on your books when it's not December 31st, being the big one. Anyway, sales, we have $26,450. Then we are going, so first thing I'm going to do here is I am just going to tick this off. I'm going to have to use a couple of these things twice, so I'm doing it this way. sales here. Then we're going to be finding our sales discounts and our sales returns and allowances. So less. What's their account name? Sales discounts. Thank you. And that's for 220. And sales, returns, and allowances. And that is for 1,980. Once again, I get pretty aggressive about just ticking it off, saying we've used it. We should have then net sales. What are these two added up? If somebody can please do that for me. Thank you. And actually, I should put that here in red because we're subtracting. Just to make that clear that we are subtracting this. And we have our net sales. 24,250. Bless you. Okay. Now, do we have a cost of goods sold account? We should.
Yeah.
Okay. My formatting isn't going to be perfect here because I'm trying to not squish things, so please excuse me. Cost of goods sold, and that is for 14,279. And I'm going to write that in red just to make it clear that we are subtracting it. 2,279. And once again, we cross it off. Oops, I got a little aggressive there. 14,000, and what's the gross?
9,971.
I'm going to ask you for that one more time in 1 second here. Gross profit is how much?
9,971.
971, thank you. Now we're going to be doing the operating expenses. So it's at this point where I start just going down and identifying anything I can see as an expense here for an advertising expense. Let's take a look. Advertising expense, 780, perfect.
Yep.
Let's just... So this is... That was for 780. And I am actually going to just write it over here, just to keep consistent with my template. So advertising expense, that's done. Let's look for the next one. Okay. Charitable donations should be an administrative expense.
Oh, I think that should be another expense.
There should be in other. Okay, you know, I think you're actually correct on that. I think it is in other expenses.
The last one.
But there's actually a zero balance on it anyway. I'm not sure why I'd have it in my trial balance with a zero, so I'm just going to tick it off just to say that we never see it again. As I see a zero. Okay. Computer supplies. Okay, computer supplies expense. That one should be in the general and administrative one. That's not an operating expense. So we're just going to keep going. Depreciation expense should be an operating expense. Again, the distinction between operating and general is operating is what's needed to make revenue, and the administrative is just keeping the business going. So depreciation expense is operating. And that was for 504. And we had a second one here.
I think the second one is in the general and administrative expense.
You're absolutely right, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with this one, I just saw depreciation and I got very excited. We have insurance expense that should be general.
Yeah.
Merchandise, no, that's not an expense. Mileage expense that should be general. Tough to say, should be general. I'm going to call it that. Rent expense, is there two separate rent expenses here? No, there's just one. I'm going to call it,
Yeah, I think that should be selling expenses.
Yeah, I think so too. Sometimes sometimes they actually separate the rent
Yeah.
expense out from the administrative, so I'm going to call it an operating expense here.
Since it's silent.
So we wrote that down, we're going to tick it off. Repairs expense, computer, I think that should be an operating expense because we had the same thing here. That's for 120. And then we have a wages expense, which again, sometimes are separated out into operating and general. Right now, we just have one. So we're just going to call it one. And that is for 11,385. And that's a wages expense right there. So I start kicking things off. Okay. Can somebody please quickly do this math for me? $17,431? 39, okay. Thank you. And I'm sure if I were to look at the official answer key on this, I may have mixed up an operating and general expense, but it's not clearly defined here, so we're doing the best with what we got. Okay.
Yeah, actually, about computer supplies expense as well, I think it's in selling expenses, because the nature of the business is all about computers.
You're right, it is. Okay, I was calling it a computer supplies expense in general because typically, you're right about the nature of the business. Typically, I would think that'd be an administrative thing.
Yeah.
In this case, I'm gonna leave it in general administrative just because I don't want to make a mess of our work right now. But I think theoretically that you'd be correct.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, so let's start looking at our administrative expenses here. So I have computer supplies expense, that's for 2,100. I'm just going to zoom in a little here. Yeah, I said 2,100. Let's tick that off. Depreciation expense, office equipment. And that was for what was that for? 600. So let's just tick that off. We have our, did we do an insurance expense? No, we call it a general one. Okay. So next one we have is our insurance expense. And that was for 2,160. We have mileage expense.
I think that would be going to other expenses. The mileage expenses.
I would think that'd be more likely to be one of the selling or general administrative expenses because it is within the ordinary course of business. The other revenue and expenses is for things that don't come up in the ordinary course of business. Something like charitable donations, for example, because the idea being that you want to separate things that will happen consistently year to year and things that are optional. Does that theory make sense? Yeah. All right, so we said insurance expense and then we said mileage expense. And that was for 5,886. None of these are expenses. Okay. So we have all that. We have our total.
10,740.
I'm going to get that from you in 1 second here. How much did you say that was, sorry?
10,740.
46?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we should have total operating expenses here. Before going on, any questions that have come up? And I'm just double checking that because this is a mistake that some folks will make, and I want to head it off right now, that the prepaid insurance, prepaid rent, we know why that's not anywhere near our income statement? Or do you want clarification?
There has.
I'm just going to spend 10 seconds clarifying them. The reason the prepaid stuff is not on our income statement as an expense is because we haven't actually used it yet. We paid for it in advance. It's going to be used next year, but we just paid for it in advance. And actually, the technical name for that, I don't know if Evan asked you to do the technical names for things, is the recognition principle, that you only recognize things when they actually happen. Anyway, so just quickly doing that, we have our total operating expenses here, which looks like Miss Terrain is going to be losing some money. We should have, can somebody add these, oopsie daisy, add these two up for me, please? 28,000, sorry? 155? 185, thank you. Okay, I put it in red just to know that we're subtracting it. I'm just going to zoom out a little here. Okay. And then we have our income from operations. As you can see, we took a loss. And that should be, could somebody do this 9,971 minus this?
18,240.
824, sorry.
1824214.
21, thank you. I'm just going to rewrite that. And I just realized we don't have any other expenses, so I'm actually going to cross that out. I'll tell you why in a second here. So we have our gross profit, I'm just going to go right down again, of 9,971. We have our operating expenses of 28,185, and that leaves us with a loss of 18,214. Whenever you see, I did it color-coded red, just so you know it's a loss. But whenever you see brackets around here, that just means that it's a negative number. Brackets are usually just easier to see than like the cross. And the reason I crossed that out here is if we had an other revenue and expense, I'm just going to zoom in. We would have income from operations, then we would have other revenues and expenses and interest income, then we would have profit, but we didn't have any other revenue or expenses. Again, other revenue just being things outside the ordinary course of business, like charitable donations. Because we didn't have any of them, I can just stop the statement right there. Before we take a break, any questions, concerns? Let's take 10 minutes this time.